What if the chaos you see around you isn't random at all, but follows a pattern older than empires? History is not random. Every 300 or 400 years, a crisis hits that reshapes the whole of society. I'm not talking about a small correction like the 2008 financial crisis. I'm talking the fall of Rome, the fall of empires. And now, 2026 to 2030 is your decade of profound transformation. But here's the insight that most scaremongers don't tell you. This coming reset shouldn't be about doom and gloom. That's because every reset creates massive opportunity. I've spent the last 20 years diving deep into history. I've read hundreds of books, analyses, and first-hand accounts. These are from ancient empires to modern nations. And what I've discovered is pretty striking. Every great empire, without exception, moves through 7 very predictable phases. Here's what the data tells us. Phase 1 marks the initial expansion. Phase 2 is rapid growth. Phase 3 hits maturity and saturation. And by phase 7, which is a critical point, we see systemic stress and renewal indicators and the start of a new order. Now, these phases are not random. They've repeated over and over through at least 26 empires that have risen and fallen. But I started wondering whether this cycle is relevant to the craziness we see today in countries around the world. So I mapped the 7 phases carefully onto what I've called the cycle of globalization. It's a pattern that matches every developed nation. But to understand where we are in this cycle, we need to identify when our current age began. So if we use a start date of this cycle as the Peace of Westphalia, which came about in 1648, then the dates line up like clockwork. But why 1648? Well, it's because that date marked the rise of the modern nation-state system, and it established the principle of national sovereignty. It was then that a small group of people laid the foundational framework for global political and economic order that shaped this cycle of globalization. But here's the big takeaway, at least for me. In 2020, something significant shifted. You felt it, didn't you, right? That sense that the old ways were cracking open. This is where we entered phase 7 of this cycle. It's the window where the old systems accelerate their breakdown, but new possibilities also start taking shape. So it's not just about the end of this cycle, it's about the edge of a new beginning. Think of it like the end of Rome or like the Great Depression. These are moments where the past cracks open, forcing radical change. So why does this matter for you, especially if you're Gen Z or Gen Alpha? It's basically because most of the advice you'll hear comes from people who grew up at the peak of the cycle. These are Gen Xers like myself or boomers. They know the world as it was when it was stable. But the world you've inherited is a completely different one. It's a world accelerating toward rapid transformation. This is your world. The rules are shifting under our feet. But the good news is that understanding this cycle gives you a unique edge. You can prepare to not just survive what's coming, but to thrive. The cycle of globalization means you're not wandering blind into uncertainty. You have a guide to anticipate what's coming. So you can plan your life, your career, your livelihood, and your values around what's coming, not around what used to be. This deeper understanding is your advantage to not only navigate disruption and uncertainty, but to shape the future on your terms. So let's break this down a little further. We'll go back to the cycle again. Every great civilization enjoys a long, slow growth period, followed by a peak and then a very rapid decline into breakdown. The Roman Empire lasted centuries, and then a period of chaos gave way to the Middle Ages, as well as the Renaissance that followed. This is where new economic models appeared, which led to rapid growth and globalization. But here's what's different this time. We have something that Rome never had. We've got global communication, widespread environmental awareness, and a generation raised with planetary consciousness. So today, our phase 7 is similar to what Romans experienced just before the collapse of their empire. We can see financial instability, climate stresses, political fragmentation, and crazy technological acceleration, and these are all happening at once. But history shows that after disruption comes new systems, new identities, and new ways of living. This isn't just a theory, it's a cycle that's repeated over and over again, and the cycle becomes a roadmap for you. But why now? Well, it's because the global economic and social systems that took decades to peak are now cracking under systemic stress. There's debts, there's inequality, technology outpacing governance at a rapid rate. And this is where Gen Z and Gen Alpha, those who've grown up digital and resilient, you have an opportunity like no other. So imagine this. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by the chaos unfolding around us, you tap into a clear understanding of these cycles and you start designing your future differently to what your parents recommend. You discover personal resilience, entrepreneurial creativity, and meaningful purpose. You discover tools to navigate disruption, not just endure it and hope for whatever comes next. The coming decade could be as disruptive as the Great Depression. A lot of experts agree on this. But that era, the Great Depression, also produced the New Deal and breakthroughs that shaped modern society, eventually became neoliberalism. So what will your legacy be in this time of change? How will you respond when institutions falter, but new opportunities also arise? The best advantage you can have is knowing what comes next, not fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Knowing the patterns gives you a roadmap for personal growth, creative collaboration, and even leadership as the new world takes shape. No matter what your background is, you can become part of what inevitably will emerge. Here's a quick quiz. What was the main cause of the fall of Rome? Well, history shows us there wasn't one single main cause. It was a combination of economic decline, government corruption, overexpansion of the empire, and internal tensions. And guess what we see repeating right now? No matter which country you're in, you're seeing skyrocketing debt, massive inflation, corruption from government and business leaders, and huge divides between race, religion, and politics. What you might not be seeing, but they're definitely there, are signs of innovations filled with hope. So think of the disruptions you're seeing like a giant reset button. Challenging, but also inviting new models. Models like decentralized economies and alternative governance. This is an invitation to not just watch history repeat, but to be a pioneer in rewriting the future. So how do you plant seeds, and what kind of seeds do you plant in this transformation? Well, start where you are. Grow food that connects you to earth. Learn skills that build and serve communities. Develop relationships rooted in genuine care. Start small-scale experiments in your community that focus on digital skills for emergent economies. And build networks around shared values. This is how Gen Z and Gen Alpha will lead what comes next. Maybe another pattern interrupt from the doom and gloom. Visualize this. Every collapse was followed by a burst of culture, art, and new ideas. So what's your creative response? How can you harness this wave? The old world taught us to consume the future. What if your generation learned to co-create it? What seeds of wisdom are you ready to plant? I have hundreds of ideas and suggestions in my book Crisis Codes. It's my guide to finding your unique purpose and clarity in times just like these. There's a link somewhere here to download your free copy of Crisis Codes. You definitely don't want to navigate the next few years without this, so I hope you'll grab it. That's all I've got for now, but before you go, drop a comment below, What's your biggest hope or insight for 2030? Remember, there's a new world emerging. Make your mark count.